Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the second half of today. One of the things I wanted to point out is that you'll see Taylor Nakagawa, who was a student in this class a few years ago. He's now at TechCrunch, and one of the things that the students who have these off-campus projects get to do is they get to go visit. And so this team here was on San Francisco at TechCrunch's headquarters. They presented. They got got feedback there. The Wall Street Journal team did that too in New York, and the AP did it as well in New York. So with that, I'll let you guys take it from here, and welcome TechCrunch.
Hello. It works. Sweet. So we're all excited and prepared to present to you guys. We are the TechCrunch team, and the first thing we're going to do is introduce ourselves.
My name is Dave Ketchum.
I'm Ileana Jones.
I'm John Beck.
I'm Andy.
I'm Pan Lee.
And the way our presentation is going to go is Taylor is going to walk us through the problem statement they addressed to us. We'll cover some analysis and a survey that we performed throughout the semester. We'll talk about 3 recommendations we have for ExtraCrunch, or TechCrunch as a whole. And lastly, I will wrap it up with some conclusions. So without further ado, here's Taylor.
Hey everyone, this is Taylor Nakagawa. I'm on the audience development team here at TechCrunch. Recently we launched a subscription program. It's called ExtraCrunch, and the whole purpose of it is to give our core audience, which is people who are building startups or people who invest in startups, more utility on advice on how to navigate the whole scene, and also an in-depth knowledge on how the markets are moving within this whole realm. So the reason why we partnered with the journalism school this semester is to bring in a younger audience to give us more ideas around how we can attract a younger audience to make them aware of TechCrunch and also make them aware of the subscription product that we're building at the same pace. So one of the first parts of this whole challenge was really to get the students in and trying to get them brainstorming on how we can build a better community on universities, what we can charge universities and individual students, and also new features around how TechCrunch can interact with colleges as a whole. The second part of the challenge is looking at premium audio. If we were to add an audio component to ExtraCrunch, what would that look like? What kinds of content can we produce in that realm? And that was the second part of what we challenged the students to do with. And finally, the last part was talking all about, where are we moving forward? Does ExtraCrunch 2.0 look like? And so those are the 3 pillars that we challenge these students to work with. I'm really excited to see, what they've been coming up with. And when they came out to San Francisco, they really wowed the entire TechCrunch team. So enjoy the presentation and good luck to the whole group.
So as Taylor just mentioned, what we're really trying to do is find a way to get to a younger audience with TechCrunch. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to talk a little bit about TechCrunch's current consumer pathway and where that leads to subscriptions later down the road for this TechCrunch premium second tier program that was launched in February by TechCrunch. So first, let's just talk about the consumer life cycle. So as of right now, TechCrunch has about a total base of 16 million users. This is through analytics that they collect through their website. These are both potential users, casual users, as well as their active users. And this active user base is made up of about 160,000 users and is quantified by having them visit the website 10 times a month, roughly. And these active users, they have some specific demographics that are very key to this group, mostly male, ages of 25 to 50, and they also have a higher than average income. And this is mostly because of their interest in either investing in technology startups or the entrepreneurship of wanting to start their own eventually. And we believe that it's these active users that will eventually become our ExtraCrunch subscribers in the future. So when ExtraCrunch was launched in February, they started with a free trial, and that free trial to paid conversion rate was about 80% to start off. So 4 out of every 5 individuals that were on the free trial decided to go to the paid subscription. So what we can assume there is that of the 160,000 active users, that 120,000 have some level of interest in potentially subscribing to ExtraCrunch. So with that, we can calculate some expected revenues and subscription growth based off of estimates of churn as well as growth that were given to us by TechCrunch. And as you can see in year 1, we have about 3,000 subscribers. As of right now, they have about 900, and it's been about 10 weeks since the launch in February. But what you'll notice here is that the growth year over year is slowly declining. And what we find is that TechCrunch won't be meeting its performance goals that was handed to us as $10 million of revenue by year 5. And there's really 2 components as to why they're not going to be reaching these goals. First off, as active users become subscribers, those subscribers are going to churn eventually, whether it's because they're not interested in the industry or they find a competitor's product or a multitude of reasons why they churn. But secondly, and probably most importantly, TechCrunch has informed us that their active user base is stagnant right now. They are not growing that active user base. And that's why they approached us as to why or how we're going to target another market to grow that user base. So we have 2 recommended strategies. First off is the strategy of growth. This is to essentially outpace the churn that TechCrunch is expecting for their ExtraCrunch subscription model and to increase potential users as well as casual users. This comes in the form of 2 recommendations that both Ritwik and Panpan are going to talk about later in this presentation. The second strategy is a strategy of value, and this value is supposed to reduce churn and retain our subscribers and active users that we have transferred from our potential users up the funnel. So from that, I'm going to hand it off to Ileana, who's going to talk about some of our survey results that we conducted earlier in the semester and the market potential that we have for college students.
Thanks, Nate. All right, so one of the things that Taylor did say is they're wanting to find that younger audience. So our question was college students, but why college students? One, they are going to have a higher education because they are going through college, but one of the biggest things is that they will have a longer customer or consumer life for this. Like Taylor mentioned before, and like what Nate was talking about, the current consumer right now of TechCrunch is male 25 to 50. Starting college students in this early, getting them in, wrapped in at 18, adds 7 years to TechCrunch overall. So we conducted a survey. There was 100 participants. We had 18 different colleges participate. We had 5 major ones, which were the University of Alabama, the University of Wyoming, the Colorado State University, the University of Missouri, and San Diego State University. We were more looking for a geographical survey versus a demographical survey when we conducted this. 3 of the biggest key indicators that came out of this survey was that 77% of our survey respondents said that they were interested in the tech news and startup industry news. However, 57% weren't even following any type of industry news or tech news, anything like that. And so that's where something that we can really capitalize on with TechCrunch, using these numbers to help them find those people. Within the survey, we did find that 85% of our survey respondents didn't even know about TechCrunch. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing for TechCrunch because they are looking for those specific college degrees, and that's where we can actually find those targeted markets within the universities. Instead of marketing to the entire university and the entire college population, we want TechCrunch to focus on those technology expected degrees, those entrepreneurship organizations within the universities, and then also finding those startup teams and clubs that universities and colleges have across the nation. TechCrunch can easily find these by looking at the CEO organization that does it is current across the nation, by also looking at college incubators, and then doing something similar and participating in something like the College of Business has here at Mizzou with the PDP program. One of the easiest ways for TechCrunch to actually incorporate ExtraCrunch is that currently TechCrunch's app does not have the capabilities to support ExtraCrunch. By providing a new app that would not just have the basic features in the simple app newsfeed, they would actually be able to have an improved platform with calendar features that have everything that's going on with TechCrunch throughout the United States for college students to see, maybe participate in and attend, but it would also they would be able to have target push notifications to be able to get those updates whenever they're looking for them. Within the app, we have provided this example of what it would look like. We did find that 80% of our respondents did enjoy the save for later aspect, which is a big thing that TechCrunch can incorporate into the app so that students who are looking to find this, they see it, they can't read it right now, can look at it later. They also liked the 50% of customized news, which is similar to what Netflix does based off of what you've already watched. They recommend different articles. This would be the same type of thing for TechCrunch and ExtraCrunch specifically. So based off of our updated app design and our survey results, we've come up with 3 recommendations, which are a startup battlefield for students, a campus podcast tour, and looking at the podcast structure and content. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Ritwik, who's going to talk about the startup battlefield for students.
Thanks, Ileana. So the first recommendation is going to target growth. We spoke about growth and value, right? And this is going to be targeted growth to the demographics amongst college students that TechCrunch is most likely to succeed in, right? And that's the Startup Battlefield Student Edition. So what is Startup Battlefield? Startup Battlefield is something that TechCrunch already does. It is probably the most prestigious startup competition in the world. It is held annually at Disrupt, which is TechCrunch's big event in San Francisco. And previous winners of Battlefield include huge unicorn companies, companies that went on to have unicorn status, like Dropbox, Trello, and Verb. So Startup Battlefield is an existing brand, and TechCrunch has the existing managerial expertise of putting it on successfully year after year, right? Now, our idea is to take this existing idea of Startup Battlefield and apply it to college students. Now, at this point in time, there are already a lot of good startup and pitch competitions in the US. There are competitions like Pitch Her, You Pitch, Student Startup Madness, and the SEC, the Southeastern Conference Pitch Competition, lots of other regional level competitions. Our idea is that instead of just creating another startup competition for students, TechCrunch should create a layer over the existing infrastructure. So take the winners of the existing startup and pitch competitions and have them face off in a national level Startup Battlefield Student Edition, right? This will be structured on the same lines as the existing Startup Battlefield. So it will be judged by famous startup founders, by venture capitalists like people from Y Combinator who judge the existing Startup Battlefield, and technology reporters. So students who participate in this Startup Battlefield would have several key advantages, and we think this idea is advantageous to all the key stakeholders, in fact. So students are looking for what? They are looking to take their basic startup idea and turn that into a successful company. Now that is pretty much what TechCrunch does with their reporting. That's the basic model for TechCrunch, right? And that is why they have this main Startup Battlefield. So students gain that advantage. They gain a new platform to showcase their talents. They gain mentorship and fundraising opportunities and networking opportunities through the Startup Battlefield. And the biggest prize for student teams would be that the team that wins this student edition of Startup Battlefield gets to go to the main Startup Battlefield at Disrupt, right? So student teams have that advantage. They're competing for that. Universities gain because there is a huge amount of college pride involved in such a venture. Universities do well when their students do well, and they go up the rankings and that kind of stuff. Now, universities gain that, and they don't really have to spend anything on this thing at all, because TechCrunch is doing all of that. TechCrunch gains because TechCrunch can use its existing expertise on putting on Startup Battlefield and the existing brands of Disrupt and Startup Battlefield to grow the TechCrunch brand amongst college students. Remember that our survey pointed out that 85% of our survey respondents had not even heard of TechCrunch. So to grow into a new market, you have to take the advantages and strengths that you currently have and apply it to this new market. One of the key parts of this strategy would be the smart use of social media. TechCrunch is pretty good at that. They have more than 1 million followers on Twitter, on Instagram, 500,000 followers on YouTube, that kind of stuff. Now, students who would go for this Startup Battlefield, they'll be sharing stuff, and that reaches those networks. Now, these students, as Iriana mentioned, usually form part of clubs and teams like College Entrepreneurs Organization. So that's a subculture that already exists within colleges. And we want TechCrunch to tap into that subculture. So when these students share this stuff on their social media, it goes right into that subculture, which TechCrunch is not currently reaching. So just to quickly summarize our first recommendation, you pick regional winners that keep costs low. You give global exposure to the TechCrunch brand amongst the community of college students through the smart use of social media, and you leverage the existing expertise and brands of Startup Battlefield and Disrupt to grow the TechCrunch brand in colleges. That's just our first recommendation. We have 2 to go, so now I hand it over to Pan for the second one. Go.
Thank you, Ritwik.
To reach out to the students. And then, why is this? This is about to improve brand awareness, because Irana said that in the survey, 85% of the students we surveyed don't know about the brand. and also increases subscription interest because they know about the brand and they're interested in it. It's very possible that they will subscribe to it. And also this will grow active user base because those students are going to be the future entrepreneurs that the TechCrunch brand can exactly want to reach out and target. And then how might this work? This is about to the TechCrunch brand can target entrepreneurships and startups and the student organizations to work with the existing programs that the university already have. And then the content could be like Ask Me Anything or a Q&A session of the alumni or the faculties on the campus, because those people are the most trusted ones by the students. And then on their site, they can also leverage the premium content, and also the TC staff can deliver the content in a more educational and then entertainment style, because, well, everybody likes to get entertained, right? And then here, we think it is very affordable for the TechCrunch team to do it, because here at the zoo, we have a campus activities programming board, which is responsible for holding these different kind of events for the students to attend. Every university has a board, right? They can provide a fund that those TechCrunch team can use, that because those universities, they want to draw those different kind of working professionals' ideas, and then they can have this kind of mentorship to the students, and the students can actually learn from these real-world experiences. So with this fund, the TechCrunch people can not only go to the California, they can reach out to all the universities in the United States, and they can go to. So, and here is the majors that Ileana mentioned before, the business students and computer and information science and engineering students. Look at the numbers estimated from the Department of Education in the United States. They are very huge, and they are growing at a pretty steady rate. So actually, this is the number from, this is the number of them, during the school year of 2020 to 21, there are 2.58 million of them. And if TechCrunch will listen to this idea, and then you can reach out to 5% of that, is 130,000 of them. And then this is actually very near to the current active monthly users of them, which is 160,000. So this is a really powerful suggestion, we think. And with this, I'm going to hand out to Nicole to talk about the podcast structure.
Yeah, so our final recommendation is about the structure and content of the podcast itself. So the podcast that will be going on the live tour has to start somewhere. So first off, the structure of the podcast, we have a couple different recommendations about how it's going to be set up. First, we think that they should have audio articles for consumers. They already have their news articles that they have written, typed out online, but commuters who are riding their bikes to work or who are driving a car can't be looking down at their cell phone to read these. So if they set that up like in a podcast structure, they'd get some more listeners. As Pan already mentioned, real-time Q&As and Ask Me Anything sessions would be successful, as well as having a famous guest host. This is something that our survey respondents said that they would really enjoy to have. And then our final recommendation is having the first 10 minutes of the podcast free. So a little bit more about this. This would be more of a 10-minute sample on sites like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, where people are already going to consume podcasts. The entire length of the podcast would be about an hour. However, the whole thing would only be offered on the TechCrunch app. Only the first 10 minutes would be on these free sites. People could search tech and find this podcast and then sample it, and if they decide to like it, they would transfer over, download the app, and hopefully subscribe. So as far as the content goes, we have a couple different recommendations to help increase the value of the podcast. So first off, they need a tagline. Something with voice, it'll pack a punch, and something that clearly shows a benefit. For example, another tech podcast, Tech News Today, says we read the manual so you don't have to. It's a little bit sassy, it's fun, but it also has that clear benefit of they're going to read the manual so you don't have to, and they're going to tell you how to do it. Our next recommendation would be they need to make themselves stand out, promote community and exclusivity, have a young, fun tone. Don't be afraid to use clips and phrases. So, for example, Harvard Business Review, they have their normal serious podcast, but then they also have Dear HBR, where listeners can type in and ask questions, and it's a lot more laid back. One customer said it was so fun to listen to. Why didn't I find them earlier? Lastly, the Daily does a really great job of keeping things educational while still using less jargon. They use music, actually, to put people in the spot of where the news is happening and really set the tone of their podcast. So we feel that something like this, maybe having an educational host or using something that'll set themselves apart, definitely using less jargon so that they can get people who don't know anything about tech, but also keeping it educational so that people who are very knowledgeable about tech can enjoy the podcast. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to John to wrap this up.
So one thing I wanted to mention is, why is TechCrunch enticing? It's true that you can still find your tech news online for free. TechCrunch is still doing this, but TechCrunch is the layer on top. It is providing this premium service. We recognize that we wanted to hit on two strategies: growth, which comes from our first two recommendations, and value, which comes from our podcasting structure and the app that we designed. When we wanted to lay this out in a timeline format, we believe that it is possible to come out with the podcast in 3 months, along with a beta version of the app, which at least holds the podcast. In 6 months, we believe that they can go on tour and start creating this connection with campuses. And in 9 months, they can implement a student battlefield, or a startup battlefield student edition. So with that, are there any questions?
No, I have a question, and I'm sorry if this is simple-minded.
No worries.
But can we start from the beginning? What is the difference between TechCrunch and ExtraCrunch?
So ExtraCrunch is like a sub-brand of TechCrunch, and that's going to be a premium subscription-based service, including the app, the podcast, and they're hoping to really make it an exclusive thing.
Okay, so it's additional content.
Yes, it's
higher
digital
quality,
content.
Additional
Yes,
quality content.
exactly.
And then to piggyback on that, is the battlefield like a student competition?
So Startup Battlefield is one of their main events. They TechCrunch's main event, and that's for anybody. And then our suggestion is having a student edition of that to help bring that college level in.
What is, so I like how y'all went through the competition for the Battlefield in the college edition. There's already some out there, and how you addressed that. What is your competition for the app and the information against other tech startup styled companies or organizations that help out with that?
Right. So with regard to competition, there are other tech information websites such as like The Verge or CNET that offer free content. And again, TechCrunch is still going to continue offering those free articles that you can get anywhere else. And we found, specifically targeting college students, our largest competitors were going to be those free content providers, because the price sensitivity, especially for such a narrowed industry, is going to be much higher. So therefore, I guess to kind of answer your question, the importance of this is to offer premium content that can't be found in free content. So the 5 pillars in one of John's slides, where you get startup testimonials that you wouldn't be able to get from free contents or mainstream media tech news. I think it's that extra value for targeted students who are interested in investing in technology and are invested in starting their own tech company. This isn't a subscription model for every college student. You have to be very focused and very narrowed for this product to fit you. And I think that's where we separate ourselves from our competition, specifically both free content as well as our direct competitors.
Okay, thank you.
So just to add a little bit to what Nate said, TechCrunch is already considering specific pricing for college students. So the main Extra Crunch, what they already have, costs $15 a month. And they think that's really doable for the kind of audience that they have, who are pretty rich, right? But they know that college students cannot do that. So they're targeting a special price point of $29 to $39 for the entire year for college students. And they're also open to group, class, and discount packages, that kind of pricing. Okay. So they have that in mind.
I have just more of a comment. I'm from business school, so maybe this is just my own perspective. But what seems really interesting to me is younger adults or college students who may be interested in investing in tech startups, but who don't really know what that means or how to do it. So when you're talking about educational podcasts, it could actually be how to invest, and maybe smaller, lower stakes, because a ton of younger subscribers won't have the funds to really invest big. So it's almost, I don't know, I see that there could be something there. I just think it needs to maybe be flushed out.
That's pretty much what TechCrunch has in mind. So there was an earlier question about what Extra Crunch has. One of the big parts of Extra Crunch, which goes beyond the free content already available, is deep dive on how-tos, like how to pitch for first round startup funding, for example. So TechCrunch already has articles within Extra Crunch on that. And some of the things we want to do, like put those articles in audio format so that commuters could listen. Lots of students are not really consuming the news by reading it. That's what we found. They want to listen to the news. They want to get it in multimedia format. So we want to take what Extra Crunch already doing and make it relevant to the college demographic.
Consumable by the college student. Gotcha.
And just kind of like Nate had put up a slide just now of like content preferences. One of the other questions we had asked within the survey, like I had mentioned before, with like the save for later and the curated suggestions, some of the other top things that they had said were the specific insights and analysis, which kind of goes off of what you were saying of like how to invest. Like that's a very specific thing that people are looking for. But then also like editor's pick, because obviously someone running this TechCrunch or the Extra Crunch podcast, they're gonna know what's going on kind of thing. They're going to know like kind of like, okay, maybe this is something that a college student may not learn necessarily in college, but how can this help? And so like these are the percentages that we actually came up with from our survey. So that's also just kind of like these were the other suggestions that they had put in, like, or that we had put into the survey that respondents were really attracted to, I guess.
So if I'm clear, the content is really there and they are happy with the content. You are tasked more with how do you just provide the content in a way that the structure or delivery mode. Gotcha.
The delivery and how to make it more valuable. Like just make it more exclusive and special.
Okay.
A little bit of a curiosity question. I noticed y'all put up there as you talked to the different universities, y'all had I think about 5 universities or so. You put up there the tech clubs and who all you would hit. Did you find, I know the university here has a student investor club that does a lot of work with a couple of local investor clubs. Did you find that those universities also had those clubs, the investor clubs, and is that a target area that y'all would jump into or suggest they would jump into?
Can you hear me?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we focused, especially from our survey results, I think that's where this concept really came from our survey results. Because when we got these survey results and we found that a lot of people might not be interested in TechCrunch, we understood that the 100 responses that we had, they might not have a technology interest. So what we focused to and what we would actually recommend for TechCrunch past this project would be to do a more focused research on those investors in those investing clubs or those entrepreneurship clubs. Anything to do with the industry of investing, especially what we mentioned, the incubators. I believe there's about 280 national incubators tied with universities. So we know that for a fact. Now, specific investors clubs, sometimes there can be more than one like national organization for investing, right? But I think any partnership within investing or entrepreneurship would be a great asset for TechCrunch, especially for growing brand awareness for Extra Crunch.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any question? Any other questions?
No more questions. Well, I just have some questions, and maybe I missed it, but did you talk much about the expenses associated with all of these initiatives?
Yeah. So specifically for the live tour, actually, and what Pam did a great job of explaining is that a lot of this, event scheduling would actually possibly be funded by college campuses in conjunction or partnership with a professional development program or the incubators, because what we're doing is we're going to have the podcast from TechCrunch, a premium podcast, information that you would have to pay for free on campus to universities. So it's kind of like an additional benefit, but hopefully that funding would come from the university. Now with app development, that price would probably be variable. We're not entirely sure. We didn't run the exact numbers on that. And it's specific to Battlefield as well. We think that the original startups, I can let Breakwick probably talk on that a little bit more.
Were y'all tasked with revenue generation? I want to make sure I'm like, y'all weren't were y'all tasked with revenue generation, or was it more for the development, the growth of the use?
Exposure is really what we hit on.
Okay.
Also, just to quickly add to what Nate said, so we kind of asked them about the financials, right? So especially with the podcast, when we had the idea of the guest host and those kind of things, which could become a little bit pricey. So we ran it with our TechCrunch contact, and he said that you guys come up with the ideas, and we can take them to Verizon and AOL, and the exact words were, the sky is the limit for what we can spend to make. So we were like, that's nice. That's pretty good. As consultants, that's like a privilege. So we kind of ran with our ideas. But we do think that none of our ideas are prohibitively expensive. They do already have expertise running Battlefield. And since they don't have to reach out to every college, they just kind of already take the winners of existing competitions. That keeps costs low, for example. So we did kind of build in like smart strategies into our proposals, but we didn't have to run each number because they said sky is the limit. Yeah.
Additionally, for the actual content and structure of the podcast, that would cost them virtually nothing because that could happen almost immediately. They already have the technology in their offices to do the podcast right there in the office. They already have the people who are speaking on the podcast. The only real cost with that was if they wanted to add a guest host. So as far as the actual podcast itself, they could start implementing that this afternoon if they wanted to.